Hector Berlioz was born in southeastern France, close to the Alps, on 11th of December 1803. And Shakespeare, who had died nearly 200 years earlier, was to prove an enormous influence on his life. Theodore Child, writing in the Atlantic Monthly in 1881, described Berlioz as an ardent Shakespearean, and of Shakespeare being the cause of Berlioz's happiness and of his misfortunes, the inspirer of his musical efforts, and in a certain way, the origin of his moral disasters, and of what he calls the greatest drama of his life. Berlioz himself, writing in his memoirs, reflects on his own wife's death by evoking Shakespeare memorably and emotively. "Shakespeare, where is he? Where art thou? I feel as if he alone of all men who ever lived can understand me, must have understood us both. He alone could have pitied us, poor unhappy artists, loving yet wounding each other. Shakespeare, you were a man. You, if you still exist, must be a refuge for the wretched. It is you that are our Father in heaven, if there is a heaven." These words deify Shakespeare and suggest a greatness that can transcend both time and humanity. Berlioz's love, passion and obsession with Shakespeare would result in numerous compositions inspired by the bard. Overture Le Roi Lear, the dramatic symphony Roméo et Juliette, Marche funèbre pour la dernière scène d'Hamlet, and his last major work, composed between 1860 and 1862, the comic opera Béatrice et Bénédict, based upon Much Ado About Nothing. Béatrice et Bénédict is a heavily stripped-down version of Shakespeare's 1599 play, with no Don John to throw a spanner into the works, and therefore no dramatic altar accusations on the day of Hero's wedding. Dogberry and his motley crew are also admitted to be replaced by Somerone, a music master and drinking enthusiast. So what effect do Berlioz's changes to Shakespeare's plot and his transformation of the genre of play to comic opera have on the character of Hero? Stay tuned, you're watching Schofield on Shakespeare. Hero is on stage for the first 120 lines of the opening scene to Much Ado About Nothing, in which it is revealed Don Pedro has returned triumphantly from battle, with one of his young followers, Claudio, being singled out for particularly lavish praise. The messenger describes Claudio's impressive feats in battle, doing in the figure of a lamb the feats of a lion, bettering expectation and being right noble. Yet Hero makes no comment whatsoever on this news, or on the man who will turn out to be her husband. Indeed, in this entire opening sequence, she has only one short line, a clarifying point on behalf of Béatrice, a woman who always has plenty to say for herself and needs no assistance whatsoever in getting her ideas and feisty points across. So what are our early impressions of this young lady with a hilariously inappropriate name? Well, she is certainly quiet and content to let others to do the talking. And at this stage, there is no hint from Shakespeare that she may be attracted to or in love with Claudio, although some movie directors choose to include blushing smiles and nudges from other characters to indicate that Hero is secretly delighted at what she is hearing. Branagh's 1993 production includes pointing and loud oohs, whilst Whedon in 2012 includes a close-up of Gillian Moore-Jess's Hero and a knowing look from her father. The first spoken dialogue in Berlioz's Béatrice et Bénédict contains small changes to Shakespeare's original that hint that this Hero may be a different sort of character, less quiet and able to ensure her voice is heard when necessary. Following the vibrant, sparky overture and triumphant chorus about the end of the war, Berlioz allocates Hero 2 additional lines in a change to Shakespeare's original, and these are significant. Even before Claudio and his glorious feats have been mentioned, Hero jumps in to ask her father after him. Following Leonato's announcement that Don Pedro, notre illustre général, arrive aujourd'hui même. Hero rushes in to find out more. Ah, mon père, quel bonheur! Et Claudio le suit sans doute? Note the ellipsis between A and Claudio, suggesting Hero is not making mere glib, polite chit-chat, but that what she is asking really matters to her. The sans doute is an attempt to be casual, but an unconvincing one. The subsequent scene and aria will make it completely clear, but there are already signs that Hero has significant feelings for Claudio. Why otherwise would she ask about him ahead of any other? This is confirmed in the next scene of Béatrice and Bénédict, when Leonardo refers to Don Pedro's great satisfaction with young Claudio. Hero cannot help but interject, and note the stage directions inserted here by Berlioz. Dieu. This may be a mere single word, but it is a single word longer than any asides or soliloquies granted to Hero in Much Ado About Nothing. The explanation reveals her impulsive joy and pride at Claudio's success in war, which Berlioz makes abundantly clear by specifying that the word must be said avec joie, with joy. The vast majority of asides or soliloquies help initiate a bond between speaker and audience. We like knowing things other characters don't, and are generally drawn to characters who open up and reveal their innermost feelings and secrets, even when they reveal hideously evil desires and machinations. Hero, of course, does not fall into this category, but her Dieu allows the audience to share in her excitement about love, whilst the impulsivity of her exclamation also helps make her a far more attractive character than her silent, passive Shakespearean counterparts. In Much Ado About Nothing, there is a real sense that 3, possibly 4 men engineer the relationship between Hero and Claudio. Don Pedro, Leonardo, and Claudio himself, supported by Antonio. Whilst Hero herself says literally nothing to or about Claudio on stage, either during the courtship or at the moment when the relationship is officially sanctioned. Furthermore, in Act 2, Scene 1, following a typically Shakespearean misunderstanding, Hero appears to countenance not Claudio, but Don Pedro's advances, if they should materialise. First, Antonio sternly addresses Hero with the line, "Well, niece, I trust you will be ruled by your father," which Leonardo then reinforces with the command, "Daughter, remember what I told you. If the prince do solicit you in that kind, you know your answer." The prince is a clear reference to Don Pedro, and the language of both elder male family members reveals that they expect Hero to accept him without question if he should propose marriage. Antonio's "I trust," for example, sounds civilised, but actually contains a hidden threat, whilst Leonardo used the imperative "remember" and the sinister phrase "you know your answer" to ensure that Hero follows their instructions to the letter. Hero's voice is neither heard on stage or taken into account, and the fact the conversation following both Antonio and Leonardo's commands moves swiftly back to Béatrice implies that Hero agrees with what they are asking her to do. Her silence can only be interpreted to suggest that she is prepared to behave respectfully and in a way which could result in future marriage with Don Pedro. Incidentally, love doesn't seem to feature, at least initially, in the equation. So it is clear that Berlioz wanted to develop Hero's voice from Shakespeare's original. He wanted to strengthen her relationship with Claudio by suggesting it was already established before his all-conquering return from warfare. And in Béatrice et Bénédict, he even allocates her the musical equivalent of a soliloquy to pour out her feelings of love for him. This soliloquy takes the form of an aria. Set in A major and a slow larghetto, this aria is beautifully melodic, as Hero sings of her enormous excitement that she is going to see Claudio again. She eulogises Each phrase rises in pitch to reflect Hero's increasing joy at the prospect of laying eyes upon her loved one, and is supported by the echoing mellow phrases in the oboe part. Hero seems to hero worship Claudio, excuse the pun, as shown in her visualization of a halo, a mythical bright circle of light around her beloved returning fighter. For in Berlioz, Claudio's success in battle is a source of huge pride to Hero. His noble front, his noble brow stems directly from the honour he has secured fighting the Moors. In Shakespeare, Hero doesn't ever refer to his success, let alone visualise an angel-like halo around her husband-to-be because of it. So what is the effect of this aria? Well, it means the audience share in Hero's excitement to gain an insight into the depth of her love, something which we never glean in Much Ado About Nothing, even in later sections of the play when the pair's marriage has been announced. The aria's enchanting melodies, A major positivity and soothing string accompaniments give a sense of the purity and uninhibited joy that Hero feels due to her love for Claudio. But it would appear that Hero's feelings are reciprocated and that in Béatrice and Bénédict, she and Claudio have an established, deeply loving and equal relationship, which cannot be said about its equivalent in Much Ado About Nothing. This is confirmed when the pair first meet on stage in the opening dialogue of scene 7. Once again, Berlioz's stage directions are revealing. Bénédict is in full flow. This is especially his wont in Shakespeare's original, describing how 5,000 morts restaient sur le champ de bataille, only for Claudio to erupt, cher héros, and Hero to respond, cher Claudio. Berlioz specifies that while saying his line, Claudio should be courant à Hero, running to Hero, and following their two lines, the next stage directions indicate that il s'éloigne vers le fond du jardin en causant. The idea that attention could be wrenched away from the more engaging figure of Bénédict to focus, albeit briefly, on the relationship of Claudio and Hero would be unthinkable in Much Ado About Nothing. And incidentally, even Bénédict seems a different kind of character, interrupted apparently boasting about the number of men killed on the battlefields. Yet, in Béatrice and Bénédict, Claudio and Hero's relationship is strong enough to temporarily halt the flow of words from one of Shakespeare's most talkative and witty characters. They are so delighted to see each other that they impulsively start to run towards the other. And the fact their lines are identical, apart from the French feminine agreement for cher and their different names, implies an equality in their relationship which is entirely absent in Shakespeare. After running to embrace each other, they also move to the back of the stage en causant, whilst chatting, suggesting that they enjoy each other's company and share tumultuous feelings of initial, passionate love. In Much Ado About Nothing, unlike in Berlioz's adaptation, there is a notable lack of equality in Claudio and Hero's lines. And the moment their relationship is formally sanctioned, confirms our impression of Hero as at best a shy woman who prefers to say as little as possible, or at worst, a woman with little or no substance. In Act 2, Scene 1, Don Pedro reveals that Claudio was wrong to doubt his honourable intentions and concludes triumphantly, "Name the day of marriage and God give thee joy." Leonardo then continues the patriarchal procession by formally pronouncing that Count Claudio should take of me thy daughter and with her my fortunes, which just leaves Hero's husband-to-be to explain his apparent lack of response with a limp and rather unconvincing, "Silence is the perfectest herald of joy. I were but little happy if I could say how much." Hero herself says nothing. Now, there is clearly some truth in Claudio's sentiments. As the events of King Lear show, those that gush about their feelings and are able to heave their hearts into their mouths are often the most insincere. Nonetheless, the overall impression of Claudio at this stage is middling. He seems immature, as hinted first in his physical description as having the figure of a lamb, and then in his readiness to let Don Pedro woo Hero for him. As a result, we cannot celebrate his relationship with Hero in the same way we delight in the movement of two young people running towards each other in Béatrice and Bénédict. Of course, Shakespeare knows what he is doing, and it has been argued that he deliberately weakens the Hero-Claudio relationship in order to showcase the far more developed, human, three-dimensional figures of Bénédict and Béatrice and their subsequent relationship. As previously discussed, Claudio and Hero are an established couple at the beginning of the opera, and so there is no need for Don Pedro to woo on his friend's behalf. And given Claudio's respectability, there is likewise no need for coded warnings and threats from fatherly figures about the need to obey. Instead, in scene 10, Don Pedro reveals that, following Claudio's request, he has managed to persuade Leonato à ne plus retarder votre mariage. This is a crucial difference from Shakespeare's original. Don Pedro is now a mere facilitator, Leonato a reasonable parent prepared to allow love to follow its natural course. And as a result, Hero and Claudio's relationship seems far more natural and liberating. In Much Ado About Nothing, there are just too many men involved, too many coded threats and decrees, and too many moments where the female party says nothing. But here in Berlioz's adaptation, the reduced role of both Don Pedro and Leonato and the emergence of an acquiescent female voice gives us a relationship that is worth celebrating. For Berlioz's Hero has a depth to her feelings that is never uncovered in Shakespeare's original and is awe-inspiring to witness. In conversation with Ursule in scene 17 of Béatrice at Bénédict, she describes her mixed emotions at her imminent wedding and reveals, "Mon cœur est plein de joie, mais le bruit et la foule me sont insupportables." Ursule is taken aback at what she describes as Hero's melancholy, which is unsurprising given "Vous étiez si gai tout à l'heure." Hero's mixed emotions develop her character further and make her seem more human. For weddings are not just about unbridled bliss. It is surely natural and healthy to require some space and reflection before embarking upon the biggest decision of your life, especially for either an Elizabethan or 19th century woman who would have had very few opportunities for fulfillment beyond the home. Shakespeare's Hero also refers to melancholic feelings with her wedding just hours away. She is with Margaret and Ursula in Act 3, Scene 4, getting dressed early in the morning for her wedding. Margaret tattles on about fashion and her mistress's fine dress, to which Hero responds, "God give me joy to wear it, for my heart is exceeding heavy." Now, these words could be interpreted as apprehension, natural for a woman on the verge of making a lifetime commitment and about to experience sex for the first time. However, the audience is likely to interpret this comment as an unconscious premonition of impending disaster. We have witnessed Don John and Boraccio's plotting and successful implementation of their plan to frame Hero as unchaste, and know that humiliation and calamity is indeed hours away. We are likely to inwardly gasp with apprehensive pity at this line. Hero senses that all might not be well, yet there is nothing she can do about it. The relentless march of deception and evil-doing will stride onwards, and only the play's genre of comedy will ensure that genuine death is not left in its wake. So at this point in Much Ado About Nothing, we feel for Hero. No one likes a nice woman to be unfairly humiliated and deprived of her fanfaric wedding day's swan song. But in terms of her character, it reinforces the idea of her as a passive pawn, a faceless object that has little or no defining characteristics of its own, a dramatic device rather than a fully functioning, interesting human being. The passivity of Shakespeare's Hero is further shown in her interactions with her gentlewomen. For even when she is with just women and women below her in the social hierarchy, she continues to be dominated verbally. And incidentally, perhaps it is this side of her character which leaves Claudio to be so easily convinced that she could be dominated physically. Following her comment about having a heavy heart, Margaret, who hours earlier has been romping merrily with Borachio, unaware that she too has been used as a pawn by ruthless scheming men, puns on her use of the adjective heavy to cackle, "'Twill be heavier soon by the weight of a man." In other words, Hero will soon have Claudio lying on top of her, consummating their relationship, which will of course put some considerable weight on her heart and body. Hero plays the high moral line to this comment and is either shocked or, more likely, pretends to be shocked, and her gentlewoman refuses to be cowed by this. In response to Hero's question about whether she is ashamed, Margaret argues intelligently, "Of what, lady? Of speaking honourably? Is not marriage honourable in a beggar? Is there any harm in the heavier for a husband?" Margaret's words point out that marriage is a respectable institution, So why shouldn't sex within marriage, which could lead to the lawful production of children, be a topic for decent conversation? Hero makes no response to this argument, and in comparison comes across as a little narrow-minded, thin-lipped and prudish. It is one thing to be outwitted by the sharp Béatrice, but to be at the receiving end of such a reasoned argument from your own gentlewoman only serves to continue the impression of Hero as insubstantial, weak, and maybe not that bright. Margaret's lewd puns not only unwittingly highlight Hero's intellectual shortcomings, but also shift the atmosphere from potentially dark and melancholy to more bawdy and light-hearted, easy to do with the subsequent entrance of Béatrice, newly and potentially humiliatingly enamoured of Bénédict. Berlioz, in contrast, develops this more serious mood in his duet between Hero and Ursule, entitled Nocturne. The tempo is achingly slow and reflective, and Ursule begins in a recitative by observing, Hero's response reveals an intensity to her character that is conspicuously absent in her Shakespearean counterpart, with sustained quiet accompaniment from violas and cellos moving in thirds. She sings in haunting, rich mezzo-soprano pitch, Hero's happiness is of such intensity and depth that it leaves her trembling, even though she knows there is something illogical to this. Whereas Shakespeare's Hero has good reason to have an exceeding heavy heart due to Claudio falling victim to Don John's machinations, Berlioz's Hero's feelings stem from the magnitude and awe of the step she is about to take. Listen to how her voice is horribly and vulnerably exposed in her next line as she sings, These words reveal a deep spiritual commitment on Hero's behalf to the step she is about to take. Her marriage to Claudio will utterly transform her life, and her trembling is mere testament to her awe at the union she's about to fully, wholeheartedly and spiritually embrace. In fact, Berlioz's Hero's feelings of love are so deep that they result in a wider reflection on the mysteries of nature and the universe. Following the recitative, the tempo shifts to a quicker, more flowing andantino, in which Hero is accompanied faithfully by Ursule, singing a third below her. Instantly, it would be tempting to speculate that if Shakespeare himself had put this scene to music, he would have chosen to have Margaret singing in sixth above her mistress to reflect her dominance. But in Béatrice at Bénédict, Hero and Ursule sing, Hero's personification shows her reverence for the moon. It is a douce reine, a gentle queen, a benign, omnipotent force for good and love that us mere human beings can struggle to comprehend unless we ourselves are experiencing heightened emotions, as Hero is at this moment. The difference between the two different Heroes at this point in the respective productions is extraordinary. One is feeling slightly uneasy, yet with the help of her cousin and two gentlewomen is getting ready for her wedding and contributing to the occasional gag at Béatrice's expense. She is due to be marrying Claudio, yet one senses that it could easily have been another man, for example Don Pedro, and she wouldn't have minded particularly. The other Hero, Berlioz's creation, has been propelled by her deep feelings of love to a profound contemplation of nature and its awesome majesty. Halfway through the nocturne, the recitative style returns to speed up the narrative, and Ursula is surprised to once again observe Hero's response is mature, wise and reflective. She tells Ursula, Unlike her Shakespearean counterpart, Berlioz's hero is able to uncover truths about the different manifestations of love to her subordinates, is able to pass on and share her powerful experiences, which contrasts with the overly simplistic associations of love, which focus only on surface joy. Tears can soulage, give a relief to intense emotions, and do not necessarily reflect sadness. And so this is a far wiser, more profound hero than the limp Shakespearean equivalent, although admittedly her depth lies in only one single tirade, i.e. that of love, meaning that she remains a character we fail to get too excited about, as Shakespeare undoubtedly intended. In Shakespeare's Much Ado About Nothing, there is one other dimension to Hero that has not yet been explored, her sense of humour. Her ability to play a role in a practical joke that will result in her dear cousin finding happiness in love with a man who suits her perfectly. In Act 3, Scene 1, she engineers a conversation with Ursula, in which both describe Benedict's apparently paralysing and suicidal love for Beatrice, who is listening in, astonished. At long last, the audience is given a glimpse into Hero's character as she animatedly describes her cousin's awkwardness, with the aim being to guilt-trip her into reciprocating Benedict's supposed feelings of love. She cries, "I never yet saw man, how wise, how noble, young, how rarely featured. But she would spell him backward. If fair-faced, she would swear the gentleman should be her sister." The lavish list of adjectives to describe men, wise, noble, young, rarely featured, suggests Hero is getting into her stride and is relishing this opportunity to talk and to successfully ensnare her cousin into the Don Pedro initiated plan. Additionally, these words reveal that Hero knows Beatrice well. In Act 2, Scene 1, Beatrice herself criticised a beardless man as being too feminine, and Hero's suggestion that Beatrice would humiliate a fresh-faced man by calling him her sister is a clever echo of these earlier lines. And so on the one hand, the audience is finally given a glimpse of personality. But on the other hand, Hero has, once again, initiated nothing herself and is merely following the instructions of a man, in this case Don Pedro. Hero is happy to follow the prince's instructions in Act 2, Scene 1, as it should help her cousin to a good husband. But unfortunately, it only serves to perpetrate the impression we have of her as a pretty puppet, albeit one who can play a role as well as the next man or woman. What is interesting in Beatrice et Bénédict is that Berlioz chooses to have Hero describe the entrapment of Beatrice second-hand, rather than presented on stage. In Scene 17, Hero recounts how much pleasure she felt playing the role. Que mon père a voulu me faire jouer. C'était si plaisant de savoir mon cousin écoute dans la chambre voisine de la mienne, pendant que nous faisions l'éloge de Bénédict, et que nous parlions de son violent amour pour elle. Watching someone talking about a practical joke held in the past is never as entertaining as witnessing it firsthand, and the effect is to make Hero a less interesting character. Yes, unlike Shakespeare's equivalent, she reveals an attractive intensity of feeling and the ability to reflect more widely on the sublime, but if one were to hypothetically take away her relationship with Claudio, what substance would be left? Would she be able to exist without her love for Claudio? As previously alluded to, Shakespeare's hero was justified in feeling her heart was exceeding heavy, as in Act 4, Scene 1, her dream wedding day is smashed by Claudio's cruel, childlike, almost petulant condemnation of her supposed whorish machinations. Once again, she is verbally overwhelmed and allows Claudio to build up a rhetorical head of steam, which culminates in ludicrously high-powered guff, including high-octane, quasi-tragic reflections on the inappropriateness of Hero's name and self-pitying, dramatic, Lear-esque questions about identity. Whereas in Béatrice et Bénédict, when Hero cries Dieu, it is an unrepressed, joyful exclamation about her loved one's wondrous bravery and strength in battle. In this scene of Much Ado About Nothing, when Hero emits true "Oh God" and similar passive yelps, it signifies her realisation that her wedding is not going to happen and that her previous moment of misgiving was accurate. With Much Ado About Nothing being a comedy, everything ends up all right in the end. Sort of. Claudio is tricked into believing Hero is dead and begins the process of repentance by spending a single night at her supposed tomb. He agrees to marry a magically conjured up cousin, not Béatrice, for she is to be wed to Bénédict in a far more interesting and worthy of celebration match. And when this turns out to be Hero herself, he is naturally delighted. And so Hero's penultimate lines in the play are to affirm her identity, which is ironically fitting, given that even at the beginning, the audience have been unsure of its existence. In response to Claudio's gobsmacked "Another hero?" she replies, "Nothing certainter. One hero died defiled, but I do live, and surely as I live, I am a maid." This, of course, is perfectly fitting. Hero is a maid, a virgin, and it was appalling of Claudio to suggest otherwise. But as far as we, the audience, have been left to know, that is all she is. A representation of female sexuality. Someone who can potentially be coerced into sexual intercourse by the man for his pleasure and for the continuation of his bloodline. As for Hero having a separate personality and identity, you can forget it. The hero of Berlioz's contribution has no catastrophic misjudgments from her husband to forgive and forget, and so can partake joyfully in the triumphant Marche Nuptiale. She joins Béatrice on the soprano line, along with a full choir and the other main characters, to call on God to preserve the faithfulness of their respective marriages. For in Béatrice et Bénédict, Hero and Claudio's marriage is unquestionably a heureux moment, a happy moment. Whereas in Shakespeare's, to at least the modern audience, it is a crushing sham which pales into insignificance faced with the exuberance of two young people we have learnt to love and got to know, and who simply must be together in spite of themselves, Bénédict and Béatrice. This has been a Schofield on Shakespeare production exploring the transformation of Hero in Hector Berlioz's final major musical composition, Béatrice et Bénédict. Thanks for watching.